I no longer have the kind of imposter syndrome or self-doubt that I used to have. I understand, like when I show up in the room, I understand who I am and what I bring and what I don't bring. I know my strengths and my weaknesses a lot better. I feel like that is something that was a major step forward for me.
Welcome to Dental Momentum, the podcast dedicated to lively discussions on business and financial strategies tailored for dental business owners. At Duckett Ladd, we're committed to transforming your business journey and supporting you at every stage. Join us as we delve into the keys to long-term practice success, from cutting-edge accounting and strategic tax planning to personalized business strategies. Together, let's propel your dental practice forward with unstoppable momentum.
What is up, buddy? Fantastic episode there, man.
So good, man. I always talk to people who are looking at either getting started, maybe an associate or someone who wants to own a business. And I always use the phrase kind of loosely that you have to have an entrepreneurial bent. I think we talked to a guy who is maybe bent 90 degrees. I mean, this guy is amazing. I mean, what an entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, I'm telling you what, I love it. I mean, you guys will get in here and listen to it, but the branding of the bulldog, I mean, he's got the bulldog mentality, just get after it and get it done. And I love just his second practice acquisition that he did I'm not going to say nuts. When we were doing that episode, like when he said that, I like, oh my gosh, I started getting the cold sweats. I'm like, well, this has already happened, right?
Yeah.
But kudos to him for what he's done. He's built a truly great brand in the dental industry.
A lot of good content on mindset, but then also some tactical stuff he did. I think people who are looking to grow, maybe they're 1, 2, 3, he's up to 13, want to get where he's at. It's going to be a great episode for him.
Yeah, it's just a super, super smart guy, just a great guy in general. So you guys are going to really enjoy this episode. Dr. David Janash with Underbite Dental Management. Enjoy. Dr. Janash, what is going on, man?
Hey, nice to see you guys. How is everything?
Everything is perfect, man. I got to say, right when I started getting to know you, starting to learn about, first off, the brand that you've developed is just so, so cool. And then I saw the dog. I see it in your shirt right now. Tell us about Underbite. Where did the brand come from? Where did the name come from?
Yeah. So I was, before, I was married and had kids, it was just me and my bulldog, honestly. And that sort of life offered me a tremendous amount of freedom and flexibility, as well as a risk tolerance that I think is above and beyond what most people are willing and able to take on. And, I think, based on where I was raised and how I was raised, I think it was in an environment where if you weren't a bulldog, if you weren't aggressive, if you weren't taking some shots, you weren't making it out of the situation that I was in. And so the bulldog really, people say you end up with the dog that sort of, you need in your life.
Yeah.
And I've always been a fan of bulldogs. And eventually, when my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, and I got one, it just became this persona that I sort of adopted. And I realized this is me and this dog is me, and I'm this dog. And one day I found this designer online and I paid him $50 for the image. And I just said, would you do me a favor and, add a tooth to his chest? And then someone on my marketing team found a font, and the rest is history. So it was a great, best $50 I've ever spent.
What's the bulldog's name? You didn't say. What's the bulldog's
His name was Buddha. He died on Valentine's Day during the COVID year, 2020. And, I got him tattooed on my arm. He's not going anywhere.
Oh, too cool, man.
Yeah. Winston Churchill was big with bulldogs, wasn't he? Didn't he kind of have that same mentality you said you had to have? And that's a great place to start if you're willing to do it. When you talk about where you started and where you came from and how you had to have that bulldog mentality, tell us about that. What does that mean? Like, tell us a little bit about your journey there.
Yeah, so I finished dental school in 2003. I did a residency, finished that after a year at UConn, and came back to New York City, where I'm originally from, and worked as an associate for a couple of years at a dental practice. And I really appreciate the dental practice and the opportunity that they gave me to work there. And then at some point, it's not that they were doing anything wrong or bad, but I just thought to myself, I can do this better. And I need to do this on my own. I can't do this forever, for someone else. And so I basically there's a part of New York, there's an area in New York City called Billionaires Row. It wasn't called Billionaires Row when I was young. It was known as Central Park South. But that's kind of was the major leagues of healthcare. And that's where all the wealthiest and most successful people went for their healthcare. And I rented a chair, just subletted a chair from someone who had a couple of extra operatories. And every 6 months, I would add another day, add another chair until I got enough of a patient flow, enough revenue to take out a loan and build up my own space in the same building, just on a higher floor. And the attitude of I can do this better, or I have to do it differently. Back then, no one was marketing online or on Yelp or things like ZocDoc. I helped start ZocDoc. I was always taking chances, taking shots with new ideas, new philosophies, and it was just something that I had to do for myself, and it panned out in a really good way. Now, my second office was one that I purchased after practicing after a couple of years, and this one was a 22 chair facility in Times Square with a $55,000 a month rent and more cockroaches in the waiting room than patients. I remember taking my father through the facility about a month or two after I closed on it, and he saw the condition of it and was looking around, and he said, "What the heck did you just get yourself into?" And I said, "It's gonna be amazing." And sure enough, me and some of the team members there were spending weekends at Home Depot, buying the flooring, buying the paint, renovating the place with our own 2 hands. And when I wasn't doing that, I was managing the office and still actually practicing in my office on Central Park South, and I'd get back and forth between the 2 on a Vespa, back and forth. They were only like 18, 19 blocks away from one another or so. And I would get back and forth on a Vespa, and I'd go to the big office every morning. I'd go treat patients, and then I go back to the big office every night. And then I'd go home. Kind of like, what I compare it to is if it were a restaurant, I'd set the tables, serve the meals, and then at the end of the day, put everything clean the dishes, count up the cash, close up the doors, and do it again the next day.
So,
I
so
did that for
real
a while.
quick, dive into that big practice though. That is a
Yeah.
big practice, man. 22 ops, 55K a month of rent. What did you see in that practice? Like, what
Well,
did you see to that you like, that's vision right there.
yeah, my practice at the time on Central Park South was out of network with PPOs, and I was out, promoting it every time I could at every bar and nightclub in New
Hmm.
York City as I was out and about. And this one was just underperforming. It was 22 treatment rooms, but it was only collecting about $4 million a year. And I knew
Cool.
right away from a statistical analysis that, a very basic back of the nap type analysis, that it could do so much better.
Hmm.
And it was taking insurance plans that they were probably losing money on. The owner, God bless him, he didn't know better how to market and attract and retain talent. And I could see that the people in there were wonderful people that sort of didn't have a very interesting future, never mind a bright future. And I thought, I could impact this office in a very interesting way. And after owning it for just maybe 18 months or so, we were able to almost double the practice. And it changed my life. It changed my career dramatically. And I was practicing the whole time. I was also practicing and was very, uh, financially at least, feeling like I was hitting my stride. And enjoyed that for a while. And again, I couldn't do that if I had kids or was married and had like a home with a mortgage. I
Yeah.
was totally free, totally open to taking on that kind of risk. I put everything up, as far as collateral is concerned, and risked everything to get that done. And it was a gamble of a lifetime. And I've done it before, over and over since, obviously. But that's sort of how I got to really understanding what it takes to manage and develop a practice. Because when you do that for a 22 chair office, you can do that for a 6 chair office much easier after that.
Well, and I think that's the point I don't want to gloss over that is the entrepreneurial risk you took there. I mean, when people think of moving from their first practice or second, they probably do anticipate a 6 op or something that's much more bite sized because presumably, you were still a younger guy. I mean, you were, relatively, I mean, you've had some years under your belt, but you were still a relatively young dentist taking that kind of risk. Walk us through that mindset. I mean, that's going to seem foreign to some people, I think, to take that big of a risk right off the bat, as opposed to maybe, why don't we try a 6 op practice and see if we can do that before we go in. I mean, that really was kind of a I bet the house kind of move, it feels like.
You moved all the chips in there,
Yeah,
basically.
right.
Yeah, and my attitude was always has been like if it doesn't work out, I could always sell it, right? And at the time, again, practicing as a general dentist, I had some comfort in my life, earning a living as a white collar professional essentially. But this office essentially eventually tripled that for me,
Mhm.
and really got me to change, everything about how I see things, and at risk tolerance actually got bigger afterwards. But I will say one of my best friends is a dentist in Arizona, and he does extremely well. He's extremely productive. And every once in a while, he'll send me a deal to look at a practice that's for sale in his local geography. And I'll tell him, hey, after you pay the debt, after pay the staff, after you pay the rent, you're going to make $100,000 a year. And after taxes, it's probably $50,000 a year.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And his answer to me is, well, I'd rather play golf on Fridays like I do now. I don't want to give that up. And I'm like, well, because it's only a 4 or 5 chair office. And so for me, going big or going home was always the sort of message in the back of my mind. There was a voice telling me go big or go home, and that's just how I've always been wired. And I see a lot of people who are doing well with practice number one. They buy practice number two, and they expect that their time is infinite, their energy is infinite,
Yeah.
but it isn't. And then all of a sudden, God forbid, you get injured or you have some issues with your health, and now all of a sudden you got double the number of issues, double the
Yeah.
number of dollars coming through or going out. And you're just like, what have I done? And so going big was just something that made sense for me financially. But the voice in my head was always like, I need to impact more lives. That's what the textbook tells you, right? And I
Mhm.
need to impact more lives. And thank God I stayed away from that 3 chair office that was also for sale, right? Not too far from this one. And shout out to the underwriter, shout out to the seller, shout out to everyone who made that big office opportunity. I feel like I'm the luckiest guy alive to have found that one and was qualified to buy it.
How far along into that second acquisition were you like, okay, I'm going to make this with number two? Like, was it like 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months in?
I'd
Or,
say the first 18 months was tough,
yeah.
but every day was a win. Every day was a challenge. Every day was a lesson, and slowly but surely things were turning around. Right, there were
Yeah.
turnover, there were unhappy team members, unhappy staff because we were dropping insurance plan after insurance plan. I'd made mistakes of maybe dropping the insurance plans in too fast,
Mhm.
and watched the numbers sort of take a big dip down. But through it all, I think the truth is as someone who was very pro doctor and pro patient experience, I knew for a fact that what I was doing was the right thing because the doctors were happier, and the patients were healthier, the office looked better, and we were, going to expand on the legacy that the selling dentist, left behind. And that's something that I kind of always kept in the back of my mind, and I was never at any point ashamed or concerned of what I was doing because I knew in the back, the voice in my head was saying, "Keep going, don't stop, don't stop."
Well, during that time period, what would you attribute that kind of growth that you had? What were the things that you did that had the biggest impact on that growth and getting that office rolling like it was?
Honestly, it was so bad. Like, it was starting from zero, so you have nowhere to go but up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I really, honestly, it looked terrible. They had paper calendars, and were managing their schedules. People had to fill out all these forms and almost like re-register every single time they'd go in because of the policies that the insurance companies that they were taking, or local insurance companies, local discount plans that they were accepting in the office, didn't have the technology. So, and then I come in with my attitude saying, no, it's got to be done this way, not that way. This is,
Yeah.
at the time it was, I closed on it actually any day now. Next couple of days is going to be the 13-year anniversary of me acquiring that office.
There you go.
And I got to be honest, even though it may have been 2011, just on the cusp of 2012, that I had purchased that office, it was stuck in 1986, right? Fax machines.
Yeah.
The dentists didn't know how to use computers. There were no computers in the office, and this is 2012. So things changed, and this efficiency and the sort of expectations that I put on people had been ratcheted up. So things were changing and evolving from a dental sort of technology perspective. And I was taking advantage of that, and this office just did not have any of that baked into it, and I thought, "This is a slam dunk," you know,
Yeah.
so I brought my marketing game, my technology game into it, and never looked back.
Hmm. What made you go from there? So 2011, now you got two practices, your existing practice or your first practice, and now this big boy
Yeah.
of a practice. What made you keep going?
I started a family, got married, had 2 kids, and then about 6 or 7 years later, bought a third practice, and the story was the same, great address, great part of Manhattan, very, very, sort of affluent area, but in a practice that just needed a major, major facelift, needed a major shift in the philosophy and the strategy and the marketing game, and basically took that one up, and I remember the underwriter at Bank of America who gave me the loan on that practice. I love telling this story. He said, Dave, I'm going to give you this loan to buy this practice. It was collecting $1.6 million and it had 6 treatment rooms. He says, Dave, I'm going to give you the loan to buy this practice, but I just want you to know after you pay the debt on this, you're going to make $15,000 a year on this $1.5 million practice. And I don't think it's the best investment. And I said, Bob, his name was Bob. I said, Bob, watch me. And I remember shutting it down for a long weekend, and we renovated it over the course of a long weekend. And within the first 6, 7 weeks, we had essentially doubled the revenues of this practice within 6 weeks. And the selling dentist, who I still have a really great relationship with, who has since retired, said to me, and this is the best compliment I can get, I don't understand how I'm 67 years old and I'm making double what I used to make. Where have you been for the last 20 years of my life? Right. And again, by then, the muscle, the management muscle, the technology, the playbook, if you will, had been so robust because for 22 chairs, it takes a lot of strategy and some luck, obviously.
Yeah.
But to do that for a 6 chair office, much, much easier. And I wasn't the one installing the flooring and doing the paint anymore. By then I had to pay people to do it. And they did a fantastic job. And we flipped it. And we actually operated those 3 offices for quite some time, and enjoyed that. But then, honestly, like a voice starts to creep in your head. And I think this is something that, we could dive into, but am I an accidental success? What's
Hmm.
going on? What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? How can I be at 3 places at once? And how do I also show love to my wife, my dog, and my 2 kids? Now, am I really spread? If I'm still successful and I feel so spread so thin, what am I really doing right? Or is this all just by luck, right? And so that same voice that tells you to keep pushing, keep going, keep impacting more lives can work against you when you're starting to second guess yourself and you're wondering what I am I'm at that working at the edge of my competence at any given moment.
Mm.
And that is not a comfortable place for some people. But thankfully the team around me and the fact that the offices were successful, my family all supported all this, and we were able to keep pushing. So uh, and again, within the first year, we turned that from like $1.5 million practice to close to a $3 million practice, and it was just that proving that underwriter wrong was like my mission, right?
Well, I think I want to kind of stop to what you said there, talking about accidental, success. And I don't know if it would go as deep as like imposter syndrome, but I think that would be shocking for most people to hear that after you bought a 22 op practice, turned it around in 18 months, you bought this one, you doubled it, that you would have any doubt about your ability to operate. I mean, walk us through those internal dialogues. Like what were you doubting? Like, I mean, at that point, you had a track record. What was it really that kept you up at night, thinking that maybe this is all luck, like you said?
Yeah, I think, again, I never expected to be in the position that I was in. I never expected to have that kind of debt, that kind of responsibility, that kind of pressure. And, a business goes through ups and downs, right?
Yeah,
So in the summer when it's dead in New York City and no one's showing up to your offices, right? And you're
yeah.
dealing with HR issues, you're dealing with all sorts of challenges. You're thinking, what have I done, right? And then, again, the business goes through its normal cycle and everything is better, and so that voice maybe gets quieted down. But it was that, as well as, again, how do I does my heart have enough love to give everyone and everything that I'm surrounded by, right? Like my newborn daughter, the team members who I personally feel like a very strong connection to, and I identify as a team member. I don't identify as a CEO, and so I thought, what how can I'm no different from them, right? We're all sort of in the same sort of fight every day together. And again, you go through ups and downs, which are natural. And on those moments where you're wondering, what the heck am I doing right? Why do I deserve this? Right? When you really don't, all of a sudden, as a general dentist for at that time, I'd practiced for almost 15 years, 14 years. What was I doing with my life? And the people that you're surrounding yourself by are different. The conversations that you're having are different. You're
Yeah.
not a general dentist anymore. And I was still practicing, by the way, this whole
Well,
time with the
well,
three.
that's what I was going to ask. When you bought practice number three, were you working clinically in that practice as
Oh, yeah,
well?
I'm still practicing 4 days a week, and
So
I was.
that Vespa was just buzzing, man, between
Oh, yeah,
practice to
back and
practice.
forth,
You
yeah.
still got the Vespa,
He
right?
may have upgraded from
I
a
actually
Vespa
gave
at
it
that
I
point.
actually gave it to a team member, recently, but it's still humming along, doing its thing. I just as a gift, I gave it to one of my team members not too long ago, but, yeah, I mean, it was just, a function of, ambition, efficiency, some creativity, a significant amount of luck if I would, because again, I could have ended up with that 5 repertory office that was nothing compared to the big one as far as price and risk is concerned. But it just didn't have the kind of meat on the bone that the
Yeah.
big one had, right?
So
So
with that number three, though, you still working clinically in all three practices, I mean, is this wearing on you? Is it getting hard managing clinically all the stuff of three offices?
it was hard. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. There were days where it was great, but there was also, honestly, on the flip side of that, there was a stability that came up. In other words, it was unlikely for all three offices to have a bad day. It was
Hmm.
unlikely to have all three offices have a really great day. There was this thing that happened where, it went from a tiny little sailboat to a mega yacht, right?
Hmm.
And mega yachts just don't get swayed by the
Yeah.
wave just like the small ones do. And so I had to take a step back and understand that because it was larger, it was harder to knock off its path also. And then, to get out of the chair, that was a whole other mindset shift that had to occur. And by then, the sophistication and refinement that was necessary to take things further had leveled up significantly. And I was no longer buying practices on a hunch, saying, "Oh, this is a gold mine," right? Like, because most people probably walk into an office and think, "Oh, this is a gold mine. I got to take advantage of this." Well, by then it had gotten so sophisticated that I knew, okay, this one is going to go up by 10%. This one is just going to cash flow, and I don't have to do much. Anytime I would buy an office, the narrative kind of was they weren't as wild as the first couple, but the understanding of what was potentially what was possible, what the potential was, what I was expected to get out of it had become a lot more clear for me, and so the intentionality and clarity on the next ones became something that really offered me a chance to continue to scale.
When I hear you talk about that, I mean, that's like next level. That's leveling up. And I think through, when we talk to people like you or who are trying to become what you've become, it's all about what's the highest and best use of your time. And sure, practicing, allows you to make a decent living, but it's not going to allow you to build the kind of portfolio. So to kind of expand on what Jared asked, I mean, there was a point in time when you said, I can't do it all. I'm going to have to trust that somebody's going to be able to deliver clinically, and I'm going to focus on building this thing into something special. I would assume. I mean, was there a point where you actually had to make that decision in your mind, and what led you to that point?
Yeah, so the truth is by practice number 3, I had another associate who essentially replaced or picked up a couple of the days that I was practicing, and I would advise anyone, not only do you have to get clear on the numbers, but if you do plan on replacing yourself and taking yourself out of the chair, start as early as possible, right?
Hmm.
And make sure that you have a real sense of what you bring to the table and what your expectations are on who else you bring into the table to replace you. The sooner the better. When I stopped practicing, it's going to be 5 7 years now. When I stopped practicing, I went through another very sort of interesting time, kind of a little bit of a dark time actually, because here I am giving up my career as a white collar professional, this income, this living, this is a comfortable living, and I'm giving it up, and I had to make sure that I could afford that, right?
Hmm.
So practice number 4 and 5 were offices that I picked up literally within 2 months of one another. One of them was a $2.5 million practice, and the other one was $1 million practice. The two practices that I picked up at that time in order to get out of the chair, um, did not have the same type of potential to double or triple in revenue like the other ones that I had purchased at the time. They were just stable practices that the sellers were going to stay in and were going to continue to work, and I didn't have to be in them, but I did have to achieve something, which was to improve them. I didn't think I could improve them, and in my mind, I thought to myself, okay, let's keep the expectation on these two really, really low. If you can get them up 10, 15% in revenue, then that would be great. And again, both of those offices were sold to me by sellers that wanted to stay on. And we had by then, a small team of people that helped with the bookkeeping and the HR and some of the operational stuff to sort of fill in some of the cracks that were popping open. And I had to make sure that the offices were cash flowing. I had to make sure that the offices were large enough to throw off enough cash to replace my income as a dentist. And that's when it sort of made real financial sense. Too many people, I think, give up the idea of practicing too soon because they make so much money and because they haven't replaced themselves. And the organization, the hard facts are the offices throw off a certain amount of cash, and that cash has to replace your living as a dentist.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do that until after just thinking about it and looking at myself in the mirror, thinking this is what I need, this is what I have to grow the business to, and these two offices check the box. So that's what we did back in late 2018. Was picked up number 4 and 5.
So at that point, you had 5 offices, and that's when you started removing yourself from the other three slowly, or is it all at once, or was it
Oh,
just slowly?
it was rip the Band-Aid off kind of
Oh,
moment.
wow.
Oh yeah, rip the Band-Aid off kind of moment. When your mom, I tell this joke a lot. When your mom calls you and says, "Hey Dave, I'm having a toothache," and you tell your mom, "No, I can't help you today, mom. I'm having a meeting with some people and I'm not in the office." That's when you've totally went from Luke Skywalker to Darth Vader and joined the dark side. So I've been, that was real, right? Watching my friends of the office, my personal friends saying, "Hey, Dave, who's this dentist taking care of me today? Why
Yeah.
aren't you doing it?" Right? That was a
Yeah.
lot of guilt, a feeling of abandonment that I had went through. From a financial sense, it was okay, but the mental load of stopping the practice was, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But I was a member of the DEO community, an early member of the DEO community, which I give them a lot of credit to. And I was around a lot of people that were like me, who had done this in ways that were bigger and better than me, that were able to guide me on this journey. And there was a saying, um, "Work on it instead of in it," and that's sort of the shift that had to happen for me. So that was an absolute blessing.
Once you removed yourself clinically 100%, I mean, throughout that, 6 months, months in, or a year into it, were there ever points where like either, I guess, two things. One, they're not doing as good a job clinically as I could. I got to jump back in. Or, man, I'm not making what I want. I need to jump back in and make some more clinical wages. I mean, what did you ever, or is it more like, hey, I've separated, kind of wipe my hands. I don't ever want to go back.
It was a very quick and abrupt change. I never touched a patient after that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Never touched a patient after that.
Yeah.
And again, the comparison that I gave earlier with the boat and the wave doesn't a
Yep.
wave doesn't phase a boat of a certain size. The boat just got bigger, right? So you can't have all 5 offices have a bad day. Just
Yeah.
statistically impossible. So I just kind of had this predictability, which really kept me sleeping well at night, honestly.
I think that's to Jared's point. That's something we tend to see with these folks who are kind of moving into the group practice portfolio or building their third, fourth. Is a lot of times when they step away from the chair, they do start feeling cash poor. I've heard that multiple times because in growth mode, a lot of times it's reinvestment back in the business as opposed to distributions or just sharing the wealth with your partners. So in your situation where your office is optimized to the point that they were spitting off cash flow allowed you not just to reinvest back as needed, but also to take care of your income needs?
Well, I kept my income needs very, very low and simple the entire time.
Yeah.
I didn't live a very extravagant life, didn't spend a ton of money. I had two young kids and, the entire time. And so I wasn't going on long vacations or, just really sort of staying at home with my family. And so that actually happened, I think, at the right time for me too. The distractions, the willingness or the need to spend was really sort of quelled by the fact that I had two young kids in my family at the time. And you know reinvesting back into the business is just always something, and to the people in the business,
Right.
Hmm.
something that I was always very, very fond of. And I think when you do that, it just gets a little easier, right? Keep your expenses low, keep your expectations low, your ego in check, and keep reinvesting into those people and the business, and eventually, things sort of will flourish.
Yeah.
Fast forward to 2019, we picked up three more offices, and again, having a blast. At that time, by 2019, when I had five offices, then I became, as the CEO, I was really like chief of business development too, because all I did was look for offices to buy, really, as well as run the company on a day-to-day basis, right? But not in a very sophisticated or refined way. Still kind of, duct taped together in many places and ways. But learning, listening, and learning constantly, right? Listening to podcasts, going to various meetings with other entrepreneurs and dentist entrepreneurs, again through the DEO, things like that. I think really helped. Just finding your community was a big deal for me.
So is that kind of what you did? I mean, getting up to 2018 or 2019 when you had five practices and then you bought another three, did you kind of grow in chunks from there to where you are today? Or what did that look like?
Yeah, for the last 4 or 5 years or so, we've been adding about 2 to 3 practices a year,
Hmm.
and that's just a function of the banking partners that we
Yep.
had, as well as the COVID era. COVID era provided a lot of opportunities for us. We leveraged our By then we leveraged our brand and reputation in the New York City metro area, and essentially took advantage of the fact that there were a lot of sellers in that 2020-21 time frame,
Hmm.
and not a lot of buyers.
What were
And
you looking for? Like when you said you
again,
had this data that you had this dialed in, what were you looking for on those practices?
it's hard to say, but there's a lot. I think we bought an office for $150,000. That was a 10-chair facility from a DSO that went bankrupt.
Hmm.
Today, that office collects $2 million a year, right?
Yeah.
Just and I remember getting the phone call in April of 2020 after I had laid off 150 people, right, or furloughed them or whatever it was,
Yeah.
and being told, "Hey, Dave, there's this DSO that went bankrupt. Do you want to buy this 10-chair facility? It's all full of Medicaid and HMOs." And I was like, I can't. I don't have $150,000 laying around right now. You can't just.
Hmm.
I'm in the corner crying, think I'm going to lose it all. What do you
Yeah.
mean? And so, PPP came through, and we ended up buying that one and turned it around, right? So it was this vision, and in that particular office's case, it was a vision for what was possible. And then there was like this sort of, if it's not a vision for what's possible, then it's a statistical analysis of what's expected, right? Given the zip code, given the payer mix, given the community that you're in, knowing that, wow, there is an opportunity here. All you have to do is X, Y, and Z. And so the playbook never changes. I think the thing that always has to be in place is some level of risk, some level of a plan, and a team that's obviously motivated to get it, just like you. The people around me are bulldogs also, not
Well,
just
tell me about the leadership team around you. I mean, at some point along that journey, I'm assuming you had to start looking to build out high level seats, call it C suite, whatever you want to call it, for people who could do what either you weren't comfortable or weren't great at or didn't have time for anymore.
yeah.
So walk us through kind of how you started to build out your leadership team.
Yeah, so my first person, if you could call her a person on the leadership team, was actually the bookkeeper of the large office. Okay.
Hmm.
And she just had more books to deal with, more books, more bookkeeping to do each
Yeah.
time we would buy another office. Um, but to be honest, I never really brought in anyone, from the sort of outside. Everyone is homegrown.
Really?
Everyone is homegrown. And I've invested time, energy, and money into myself and those team members to get them to where they are. So my current HR director started off at the front desk of the large office, and I watched her and I invested in her future. And now she's got her master's degree in organizational psychology, right? And I didn't all I did was encourage and promote that idea, but she had that inside of her and wanted that for herself. And we just aligned on the fact that we could do that for her as the company grew. So did her family, so did her future, so did her potential. And so it's a beautiful thing to see someone go through that. My current marketing director started off answering phones in the call center, and she just had a knack for being at the right place at the right time. And, thanks to the evolution of the marketing world and Instagram and social media, she was able to sort of ride that wave and figure out, like, sort of, I'm going to get in where I fit in this company. And, now people ask her for advice, right, on what to do next. So I think an academic education and an academic background is helpful, but there's really, in my case, everyone was basically homegrown and invested in from the minute that they let me know and showed me that they wanted more. And I'm a
Yeah.
big fan of feeding those people more.
So fast forward to today, Dave, like how many offices you currently have? What's your if you want to share, what's your overall collections on an annual basis? And then what's your day-to-day look like? I know
Yeah,
that's a broad question, but
yeah. So we're at 13 offices now. Can't say that all of them are easy. Some of them, need more sort of work than others. Some of
yeah,
them were more successful than others. I've definitely, had our values challenged. We have questioned the purpose of why we're doing this plenty of times along the way. Um, uh, I've had people who probably look at me differently today than they used to, right? Because I've evolved as well as a CEO. I no longer have the kind of imposter syndrome or self doubt that I used to have. I understand, like, when I show up in the room, I understand who I am and what I bring and what I
mhm,
don't bring. I know my strengths and my weaknesses a lot better. I feel like that is something that was a major step forward for me. And let me see, as far as revenues are concerned, we're, 2023 and 2024, we're just under about 30 million in revenues.
good for
And,
you, man.
it's pretty predictable, for lack of a better term, on a
Hmm.
week-to-week basis. We track things by the week. Every week we get on a call and understand how the prior week went. And we do so many different things now. We track, how many open positions there are on a weekly basis, how many dollars came through, what fires are popping up that we have to put out, like much more mature and intentional meetings and conversations and action plans going on. But there's more balls to juggle, more fires to put out. About a year and a half ago or so, we promoted the lead assistant of one of our offices into someone that now has a high level role on the operations team. And she, at one point, not too long ago, she says, we got a compressor at this office that's broken, an air conditioning unit at that office that needs to be replaced, and the chair over here is not acting right. And I said to her, I said, Melissa, when you were just the assistant at the one office that had 9 chairs, you had your fair share of issues that will pop up on an annual basis. Well, when you want to multiply that by 13, now you have 13, fires you have to put
Yeah.
out on any given day. And so it's just the same thing. It's just at a faster clip, right? And that's why we need you to help make sure that all of this is running right. And we're staying on budget, staying on time, everything's functioning properly. So finding people is one thing. Getting them to understand the necessary changes that they have to have in their mindset is a totally different thing. And so, as the CEO, I think, it's your job to not just find these people and develop them, but also manage their mindset and their path forward, because it can get lonely, it can get scary, and especially for me, everyone is homegrown. That's something that I'm very proud to say. And when Underbite's gone, those people will have been impacted in such a tremendous way. They can do anything as far as I'm concerned, right? Because they've been through it all with me from ground zero. So it's something I'm very proud of.
You've had probably one of the more interesting entrepreneurial journeys I think we've ever talked to. I think that risk that you took on that second one, that's amazing. And I think it takes someone with a lot of courage and confidence to be willing to do that. So as you kind of think through and as we start to wrap this up and you really contemplate that journey, what's the biggest piece of advice you would give to someone who's sitting there at maybe 1 to 2 trying to make that leap to get to that 13 practices like your, what's the biggest piece of advice you'd give them?
I think, generally speaking, for me, the three pillars are getting your mind right, getting your money right, and then getting your body right. And for me, that happened in that order. So the mind piece, the mindset piece is a major thing. Um, know who you are, know what you're doing, know why you're doing it. Start with why, actually, I would say, right? That's what the textbook says. Start with why.
Mhm.
There are all sorts of resources and communities that you could join to understand yourself better and understand how to do this, but it doesn't matter until you first figure out why, right? So getting all that straight is, again, for me, that was the first thing. The next thing was understanding where your money's coming in from and where it's going in a very, very clear, predictable way is a very, necessary thing. I didn't necessarily have that in place. So once you figure that part out, obviously things get a lot better, right? Because
Yeah.
you could sleep better at night.
Right.
And then the final thing is getting your body right. And what I mean by that is, and you might see like the Tony Robbins types and the other kind of like people on social media talking about how, like you got to go to the gym every day. You got to, take care of watch what you eat, take care of your body, stop those bad habits. That's actually, I can tell you right now, a major, major piece of, I think, my success and my trajectory moving forward. Again, not everyone goes through it in these three in this order, but for me, those were the three pillars. And when you start going to the gym, or for me, that's like the final boss, right? Now it's like, okay, you built this thing that's great. You really want to, and you don't want your health to be something that limits the ability of yourself and the people around you to be the limiting factor. So, you want to get to the point where, you can and would want to live forever, right? Because you're having a good time,
Yeah.
everything's clicking, and for me, that was just the last thing. But that, I've been through my fair share of transformation when it comes to health as well. So that's there's a lot there, but generally speaking, get your mind right, get your money right, and then get your body right. Have three pillars of what I think makes a successful CEO, and there's a lot to unpack in each one of those branches of what it takes. But what I can tell you is it's not just Tony Robbins talking or some other, financial guru talking in this way. These are real things that you have to take care of, right?
It's not just talk, it works, right?
Where it really works, yeah.
Well, let's do this. Let's end on this. A twofold question, right? What's what's next for Underbite Dental Management? Like what's coming, like what's next for you guys? What are you striving for? And then as you're going into 2025 here, like what's one big thing or one big decision like, man, we got to get this knocked out this year. We need to solve this. We need to do this in order to set this year up to just be dynamite.
So what I'm currently working on that's actually got me really excited, and this is something that I languished on for years and really couldn't figure out, but I'm excited to talk about this. I think it will eventually impact other smaller groups as well, and I would encourage people to maybe consider doing what I'm about to do. Um, I'm very proud of the fact that a typical office manager comes into the organization and really has no sense of how a dental practice runs. And we give them a hands-on, every month we get on those P&L calls and like Weight Watchers style, we review the finances of every office one by one in front of every office manager on a Zoom call. It's probably 25 or 30 people on that Zoom call that understands the health of the business on any given day. And that's something that, again, I'm very proud of, and I've watched office managers develop. And I'm convinced that if and when an office manager leaves our office and goes and works for Dr. Smith down the road, who's got the one office, they're a completely different office manager from when they leave our organization. But one of the things that was really hard for me to figure out during my journey is how do I offer that same type of professional and personal growth to doctors who are, you could argue are at the peak of their career and are only getting better from a clinical perspective or maybe from a financial perspective. Well, one of the things that we're working on now is we're going to now start to require, first train and then require our doctors to join on those P&L calls to align what's going on in the back to what's going on in the front. Because if you just have the front desk person or the office manager saying, hey, you got this time in your schedule. Would you please do Mr. Smith's crown today while he's in the office? Right? Some dentists are, well, I want to go to lunch, or I was thinking about just checking my emails or going on Instagram at this time when I have a break. and they don't appreciate or understand why that office manager is pushing them, to achieve a certain result at the end of the week or at the end of the month. And I think by offering an opportunity for the doctors to understand the needs of the business, not only offers them, again, to align with what's going on from the administrative perspective, but I think also, with that, we plan on sharing the profits of the practices with the offices, or with the doctors rather. And if it's not working with a doctor, it's not because I don't like them or because they're not cute or don't have dimples like I do. It's because it's not working. And if this were your own office, you would be failing, right? And it's because you don't do the little things in between. You don't check the lab cases. You don't help with every once in a while communicating with a patient or whatever. You're checked out, and that shows, right? That shows. The P&L is a report card, and the message is, if this were your own office, you crushed it. Here you go. Here's some extra money. Or if this were your own office, you'd be struggling. And no matter where you go, you're going to struggle, right? No matter how much support we offer you from an administrative or tactical perspective, you're going to struggle. So one of the things that we need to do is, and again, I had a hard time defining this, is offering doctors a pathway for growth from a financial perspective and a clarity on what's expected of them and how their office is doing is something that I'm really excited about.
Yeah. You're really educating your team, empowering your team.
Yeah.
Self-employed
It's like,
mentality.
going back to that analogy of like going to the gym. Imagine you pick up a couple of dumbbells and you're just lifting one arm, right? The office
Mhm.
managers and the administrative team get it,
Mhm.
but the clinical side didn't. And now that's one of the things that we're doing is we're going to work out that other arm and beef that other, aspect of the business up because we only got half of it done.
Mhm.
And that's, the next sort of phase for us, I think
That's
is,
awesome, man.
yeah.
Well, hey, I
I
really
hope it helps.
appreciate this.
I hope it helps them. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think you got a lot of gold nuggets here for viewers. I mean, this
For
is
sure.
fantastic. I mean, just kudos to you for what you created. I know I think we were talking several months or weeks ago, and you said something like, Jared, man, I grew up on the other side of the tracks. I wouldn't have ever thought that I could build what I build. And it didn't come easy, right? Just think about renting that first chair in Central Park South, jumping off that associate position to now overseeing 13 offices, 30 mil in collections. Kudos to you, man. It just didn't happen by accident.
He's got the
Yeah.
dog in him, Jared.
He's got the dog in him, baby. I love it. That's a perfect way to end. Well, Dr. Janish, we appreciate you, man. And yeah, awesome episode, buddy.
All right, great. Thanks so much for having me, and would love to come back on if it ever makes sense.
We'll do it.
We'll make it
Talk
happen.
soon.
Take care.
Take care.